Welcome to another episode of Sidewalk Conversations. I'm so glad that you are here, and I'm very excited about our topic today. We are going to be talking a little bit about creativity, and the way I want to get into that is talking a little bit about our initial revelation of God in Scripture. So if you go to the beginning of the Bible, Genesis 1:1, we read these words, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." And so our initial revelation of God is related to his creative capacity, that he showed himself as the ultimate supreme creator of it all. Now, later in that same chapter of Genesis, we are told that we are created in his image. And part of what that means to us, I think, is that we have some of those same creative juices flowing through us that are meant to be expressed. Now, one of the things I enjoy about being around artists is that they seem to have that like at the forefront of their lives. Everything they touch, whether as musicians or whatever medium they use, they are allowing the creativity of God that has been placed in them to be expressed through their life, whether through a song or through a brush. They are able to capture the essence of who God is and reveal maybe even to us a little bit more about the nature of God. In fact, one of the things I think are important to say is that they are not just imitating the world by capturing something in music or capturing something on canvas. They are actually creating a fresh new perspective on that world. So they take the raw materials of like color and sound and emotion, and they put that together in a creative way to express something about the nature of the world, whether it's relationships, whether it's the beauty of landscape, or just something deep within the soul that needs to find expression. And one of the things that I love about being around these artists is they not only reflect God's creativity to me, but in a kind of unique way, they call it forth from me. And that's why I'm very excited about our guest today. She's one of these artists that not only reflects the nature of God, but calls forth creativity from those who she's around. And so I'm excited about introducing her to you here in just a minute. I want to begin, however, by sharing a thank you to our sponsor of today's episode, Tenfold Counseling. They are located in Kansas City, Missouri, and they are a 10-person counseling center with specialties in things like addiction, depression. They work with troubled youth, and they work through grief processes with people, or whatever the emotional challenge is that people are dealing with. They seem to have a person on staff that has a specialty in that area of concern. And one of the things I love about the work they do is that they are also people who can meet with folks from around the country. So even if you're outside the Kansas City Metroplex, they are people that you can call and set an appointment with. I have known the director of the counseling center for many years, Crystal Rodenbaugh, and I love how she approaches the counseling work. And I think we could all admit that mental health is a supreme need in our day, and attending to it is absolutely important. So if you have one of those needs, please give Tenfold Counseling a call. We'll note the details here in the description below. But now I get a chance to introduce our guest. Please welcome Amy Huber.
Hi, thank you so much, Pete. You are cheering. Woo, I'm here with Pete finally.
Yeah, we
Thank
actually
you for
had
having
you on the schedule last season, and then I had a little trip I needed to make to Mayo, and so we have you early in on season 4, so thank you
thrilled.
for being here.
Thank you so much. I've been looking forward to it.
Well, thank you. So I just want to begin by saying that when I first encountered you, we were talking a little bit about this before we went on air, I saw you on the platform at Shoreline Church, our church. And, sometimes you just get a sense about people. Like, I really appreciate right off the bat your skill, both as a pianist and a vocalist. But you also had this disposition that I thought was so reflective of what I think Christian music needs to be about, where there's something spiritual about how you present yourself, and it's totally like you pick it up subconsciously. It's not something like you weren't flashy or whatever. It was just something I had a sense of. And then I met you at the prayer barn, and it's just been further confirmed every time I've had a chance to spend some time with you. So that's why I was very excited about having you here. So just let's back up the truck a little bit and talk about how you got into the music scene. What were some of the things that kind of had those initial promptings to move in this direction?
Oh my goodness. Well, it goes way back. I mean, we grew up with music in the house. My dad loved music, and my brother's actually a professional musician too.
Okay.
He's an orchestrator, a composer, a conductor. He lives in Nashville, and so he and I were always very into music of all kinds, and we grew up with classical music in the house. And so it was just, I wasn't good at sports. I liked music, writing, languages, and so that's just what we were into. And it really was in high school, as I was exploring lots of different musical paths. I really felt like this is kind of the only thing I can see myself doing with my life.
Okay.
And a lot of prayer into that. And the Lord provided a way for me to go to Baylor University. And so I was actually a flute performance major at Baylor University. So my initial musical trajectory was classical performance. So.
And then how'd you get into the worship scene?
Well, my dad and I always loved being part of the choir at church. We went to a Baptist church in Oklahoma City. And that was something that he and I did together.
Oh, cool.
And so I loved Jesus, and I really didn't sing that well at the time. I wasn't trained, but I loved singing and being part of the music that was happening in the church. And so it just seemed like the most natural place for me to express, my love for the Lord and to use that in that way. And it was something my dad and I did together.
That makes it special.
I loved that. Those were really special years.
So outside of your dad and family, what were some of your early influences? Like, who inspired you? Who did you listen to? Who kind of helped shape your music?
Well, lots of classical music, because, that's what I was choosing to study. But outside of that, growing up, I loved, it was the 80s. So Amy Grant, Michael W. Smith, all of that. But then also I loved my mom's Beach Boys records from when she was a kid. Those Beach Boys harmonies, come on, So I loved that. And then I really wasn't that satisfied with the popular music that was happening at the time that I was in high school. And so I actually started getting into listening to classic rock, which is funny, but that I really dug deep into Southern rock and classic rock. And that was what I was really into leading up into college. And so there was always this love of popular song. I'm not talking about the difference between secular and sacred, but non-classical music. I always had a love of songs and things that had words attached to them, of all different kinds of genres, and just always really loved that from the start, even long before I ever started pursuing songwriting. So.
You talk about classic rock. I always tease my kids because, of course, we played a lot of music in our house growing up, and next thing I know, and this was right at the outset of iPods and all of that. And so then I would kind of catch my kids listening to classic rock. And they're like, what are you doing stealing our music? It's just good music.
It's just good music. Well, and this was older, than I was. I was born in the 70s, but I wasn't listening to that music in the 70s when it was happening. But I just loved all the different layers and textures, and I found it more organic and real than when synthy type things started to happen. I always loved that, just the rawness of it. It's not overproduced. It's kind of like what we're doing here. We're not going to edit these things out. What happens now is what we got, and I loved that. And that's kind of how classical music is too. That's long before recordings. That's how people experience their music.
Yeah.
Was they would get in the room with their musician, and that moment that you share when the music is being shared, that's it. That's the moment.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great way to describe it. Okay, so you get on stage, and now you started with choir, but now you're like on stage at a large church. And one of the things and I'm comparing this to some of the things I've experienced in life, where you're on a platform, the lights are on you, everybody's applauding. Oh, you're so good. And there's something very ego feeding about all that. And one of the things I've watched is that sometimes people can get into this space where they start believing it's all about them and they're the star of the show, quote unquote. I've had to wrestle with that at various seasons of my own life. And so I'm curious if you have have you found yourself trying to navigate some of that yourself? Because you don't just perform in church, you also perform in the community at various venues. Have you had to wrestle with that? And if so, how do you kind of keep yourself in check?
That's a great question. Yes, wrestled with it for decades. So one of the interesting things, I think, coming from classical music is that because of what it is, perfectionism is like such a huge part of the culture. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you might have 1,000 people audition for one open spot in a symphony. So you have to be perfect at the craft. And it's all about being able to perform at that perfect level in the moment. So when you couple that along with the attention of the stage, it's really, really easy to make it about you.
Oh, for sure.
But that's the opposite of what God's calling us to as worship leaders. And so that dichotomy forced me to really get with the Lord and examine what are my motives for doing this. I think it actually really, really helped that when I started singing in the church environment, that I was not a professional singer. And it actually really helped to be imperfect and have to learn the skill of being not that great at it. And yet the point of being there was to worship the Lord and to help, take the others by the hand metaphorically and say, come with me and let's worship the Lord together.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And so the Lord was just all through my 20s and 30s simultaneously killing off that perfection in me, that perfectionism, I guess I should say, because I was never going to achieve perfection, right? But that perfectionism that I had learned as a habit in my profession, he was killing that off in my ministry. So it was very humbling. It was very hard, and it's still something that I just have to constantly check. Just have to do a motive check all the time.
Yeah.
Like, why are you doing this? I think one of the best ways to really have that heart check is to have people in your life, like good accountability, people who know you that well that they can tell they are watching you on that stage and they know where your heart is because they know you that well, and they'll come to you afterward and say,
What was that about?
What was that about? Yep. So I really guard those relationships very, very closely. They're a gift from God to me to help me serve him effectively. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And it prompts another question that we didn't really talk about, but I'm curious if you can answer. And that is I think it's really I have some people in my life that kind of look to me for that type of accountability as well. And one of the things I find so difficult is to be able to say to somebody, hey, something felt off. And so I'm curious, from the experiences that you've had with people who are in that lane in your life, what are some of the things that they've done that help make it something you could receive? Because, our automatic reaction is like, wait, what do you talk about? My heart's,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think just the long-term relationships. Actually, I'm thinking the first thing that came to mind was a conversation with my friend Amanda, who we have been very close ever since college. And it was kind of the flip side of what we're talking about here, and like we're talking about like what happens when you get a big head because you're leading on the stage, right? Well, the opposite can happen. It can also, the attention can make you so self-conscious that you don't obey the Lord and step out in your
that's
gifting.
so true, yes.
And that's still pride. And I remember a season where I was struggling with being bold enough to obey. And Amanda literally sat me down at dinner one day and was like, who do you think you are that you can tell God no about this? Like, you were meant to do this. And if you chicken out, then you're disobeying God. And she was like, I am going to come for you if you do not step forward in this.
Wow.
And I will never forget that, because it was kind of the kick in the pants I needed to get over my self-consciousness on something and to step out. And a lot of really good things happened because I did it, but I needed her pushing me.
That's
but
great story.
but that we're talking about that in the context of a relationship over years. And I knew she loved me, and I knew she wasn't just being pushy or like, come on, you're so good. It wasn't empty praise. It was a challenge. And so I really think it's the context of a relationship that makes those conversations possible.
Awesome.
So
well said. Okay, so you're also a songwriter.
Yes.
So you're not only a performer, but you also write music. And that's always fascinating to me. I love hearing people's story about how that happens. So when you are in the songwriting mode, tell me a little bit about that process. Like, is it something where you sit down and say, I want to write some music? Or are you like in an environment and something hits you and you find yourself saying, oh, I got to write a song about that? How does that work for you?
Yes, both.
Oh, okay.
When it started, it was more of I have feelings that I need to get out on paper, you know? But now I'm just so happy that I'm finally at this point in my life where I can say, like, I'm a professional songwriter. It's something I dreamed about for a long time and worked really hard to be at this point. And so now, as a full-time songwriter, I got to go to work every day. And so that means you got to go and you got to write every day, whether you feel like it or not, whether you have an idea or not. And ideas kind of, they come at you randomly. And so you have to find ways to catch them so that when it's time to sit down and write, then you go and pull an idea from your, random note on your phone or wherever you like to keep them. But having those systems in place to catch the randomness, but then having the discipline in place to sit down and actually work on it and build something every day. And so I write every day in some way. And, sometimes that results in a full song, and sometimes it's just something that needs to be deleted. But yeah, so songwriting now looks a lot different than it did when I was first starting, because it's a craft that I've learned the skills and the methods of, and I approach it like a job now instead of a hobby or just a little side project.
How'd that transition happen? Because I think for some people, it remain like, in my sense, is like when I think I can compare it to like sermon writing. Like when you have an assignment, you got to get a teaching ready. You have to sit down and do it whether you feel like it or not. But I get the impression, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I get the impression that sometimes with art, it's a little different. It's like, at least the impression I've gotten is that people will say, well, I have to wait for the inspiration, or I have to wait for something to hit me. And so you're suggesting that it's actually the opposite. Yeah, that comes, but for a lot of songwriters, it really is like you got to just sit down and start with the blank piece of paper or the keyboard and just start hitting the keys.
Yeah, I think the most prolific long-term songwriters in the industry are the ones that show up and write every single day. And so I think that's really when I made the switch to thinking, do I want to do this as a profession? Then I had to start thinking and behaving like a professional songwriter would. But it is a lot like sermon writing in the sense that you might have an idea that you want desperately to communicate, and you might be able to sit down with a friend and communicate that really quickly and have a great conversation. But if you're going to present it in a way that then is going to be, videoed, cut up into sound bites, put into a series with a whole bunch of other similar topics and themes, then you've got to think it through, and you've got to craft it in a way that it's going to have shape and plot in a way, and just make an impact It's just requires a lot more form and thought and intent. And so deadlines can help you get that done, right?
Sundays
But
come around with amazing
yeah, so
regularity.
deadlines can be really, really helpful in actually finishing things, right?
Yeah.
But I do think it's a lot like sermon writing, or I would think that for novelists, it's a lot of the same
Yes.
thing. You know, they get plot ideas, but you can't just write an idea down and call it a book. You know, you've got to flesh it out and develop everything and write the dialogue and all that. So, I think there's similarities there.
Can you walk us through like a song maybe that you've done recently and kind of how that process worked for you?
Okay. Yeah, let's see. All right. Well, so here's a song that I actually released last month, I think it was, called Short Story Long. And I wrote this with my good friend Chris Beal, and he and I write together a lot. And honestly, I wouldn't be a working songwriter right now if it weren't for Chris Beal believing in me. He was sent by God to help me. So we had an appointment to write a song together that day. And you know, normally when you go into a co-writing session, you want to bring several ideas. You want to have an idea of what you want to write for. You need some things to chase, some some points to chase. But he and I have been writing together a lot, and he tells great stories and things like that. And so I usually, what I can do is just kind of get him talking, and he'll drop some like amazing nugget of wisdom or a cool phrase or something that we can build a song around. And so that's exactly what happened that day. He came over, he was telling me a story, and he said, to make a short story long. And I was like, that's it. We're going to write that. And so then we sat down and we said, okay, if that's our hook for the song, if that's the title of the song, what's the song about? And so we decided to tell a story of a relationship that maybe had gone on a little longer than it should have. And somebody was, you know, a little too loyal, and they needed to figure out when to say no. So then we kind of wrote verses that were like plot of that. And then, you know, Short Story Long is kind of the tagline or the hook. It's also the title of the song. That's usually a smart idea.
Yeah.
And then we kind of wrote a follow-up verse that sort of said, okay, now that this person's moved on, what does life look like? And then we thought, okay, Short Story Long, that kind of sounds like it could be a cool like driving song, something you want to roll the window down. And you know, so we were talking about the vibe that we wanted for the song. And then we listened to some other songs that we kind of liked the feel of and thought this is sort of the same feeling or vibe that we would want. You know, if we could put our new song in a playlist, we'd want these other songs around it. And so those were all things that we used to help us craft the song. And so then we wrote the lyrics, we wrote the music, and then, you know.
Now, do you have like a preference, like the lyrics first or the melody first? Do you?
I'm a words person, so
Okay.
I usually end up with lyrics first. And I often get called into co-writes to be the lyricist.
Okay.
Or to edit someone else's lyrics into song-ish form. So the challenge for me then is sometimes to approach it differently and to start with a melodic idea or start with a bass line instead, and try to get out of a creative rut that way, you know. But usually for me, it's words.
And talking about ruts, do you ever find yourself in a rut?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what helps kick you out of it?
Doing a different approach like that is really good. Co-writing is fabulous. I don't know if you feel like this whenever you write sermons. If you get stuck, does it help for you to go and sit down and talk to somebody about it and just kind of pick their brain a little bit?
Yeah. So when I was regularly preaching, I actually had a team of people that helped me write the message. So
Nice.
I would start off with I would call it my synopsis. So it was like a paragraph on what I felt like I wanted to say. And here was a scripture that I wanted to build the message off of. And then it's just like exactly what you just talked about, you know, what's the plot? How are you going to get into that idea? What are the barriers that people are going to have to that subject? And then what's the application as, you know, you live out the principles. And so to have other people kind of challenge me on that, or give me have a younger person, an older person, male, female, of different ethnicities. I mean, having a creative team that helps put it together was such a gift to me. I had that gift for 20 years at a church that I served back in Missouri.
That's awesome.
It was just amazing.
I love that.
Yeah.
It really, I think co-writing is that for me, just to have, if I get stuck on something. Actually, just yesterday, I had written a song fragment. I felt like it was really strong, but I couldn't get the rest of the song. And I'd been holding on to it for about 2 months. And so yesterday I sat down with Kyle O'Neill from Shoreline that you know, and our friend MJ Ross, and we sat down and wrote the rest of the song together. And it like that takes care of the block, is because then they can listen to it and they're like, oh, this is good, or oh, you know what, all of a sudden if we take this off then we can add this other thing, and like they inherently knew what to do where I was stuck. And so that's the beauty of co-writing.
Do musicians, one of the things I noticed with other pastors when it came to sermon writing and their resistance to a team was that they felt like it wouldn't be as authentic if it was like other people's input. And so they always felt like the best place to write a sermon was in the study, alone with God in your Bible, and not really inviting other input. And I'm curious, does that happen with musicians as well, where they are kind of resistant to, like, I don't want anybody to mess
totally.
with my...
And I certainly have my songs that I'm like, this one's too personal. Nobody gets to touch this one. But that's usually how you know that song's either not ever going to get released. It's really not for that. It's just for you. And that's okay. That's, songs are great therapy. But also sometimes it's just that I know that this one, it might be a better song if I submitted it to a co-writer, but something about it I'm not willing to submit. And so I just have to set that one aside. And sometimes they'll make it to being released and sometimes they won't. But that's okay. You know, not every song is meant for, the radio. So, but I do think in general, the ones that are meant for the radio benefit from multiple voices.
That's
because
great.
multiple people are going to listen to it. And so it's going to hit more hearts if you have more people involved in making it, because it hits everyone a little bit differently. So.
Yeah, and I think, too, it's just like, it feels very wise to me that if you're going to try and say something or sing something, if it's just you, it's going to be very narrow in terms of perspective. It's going to be like your life and your things that you value. But when you bring other voices into it, it just broadens. Like I have had so many experiences where somebody will say, well, have you considered this? And it's like, no, but that's exactly, or even like you were saying, phrasing, like the long story short, just that phrase can open up a whole new way of thinking about it and gives you like ooh, I like that angle. I want to use that.
Yeah, it really, really can. So yeah, that's one of the best things about it. And then like back to the creative rut thing, the other thing I was going to say is that take a walk. That's the other thing. If you're in a creative rut, take a walk.
Yeah, get away from it for a bit. Yeah, I can see that.
It just, I don't know, it just really seems to help.
So you've been doing it for what? How long have you been doing this?
I've been writing for over 20 years, but I haven't been pursuing it in the public space, or really getting to share songs until about a decade ago. I released an album in 2016, so coming up on 10 years from that first thing, and that was a huge step in that direction. So, and now I have the privilege of writing with other artists and seeing them release things that we've co-written together, and that's really my joy. It's just helping them take their stories and make it succeed for them. Like, I really love that. That's
now,
pretty exciting.
Are you more of I like the creative process of getting the song written, or do you like the performance side? Do you have a preference?
I think I enjoy the writing part the most, which is good because that's how I'm going to spend the bulk of my time. But I actually really love recording and performing. I have not done a lot of it. I just get to kind of do it piecemeal. But I'm only recently an empty nester. And so suddenly my life is very different schedule-wise. And I also was on staff at Shoreline until January. And so suddenly I just felt like it was time for that season to end. And so I have a lot more time. So I'm asking the Lord what the next step is. But I really do love, my favorite type of performing as a singer-songwriter is like at a house show or something with about like 30, 40 people. And just having that, like we talked about earlier, that moment where you share a song and a story and everyone experiences it together. And it just kind of lives in that space. It doesn't have to be on the radio. It doesn't have to be, on YouTube or anything like that. But there's something sacred about that, that relationship with the listener that I really, really love. And so that's my favorite way to communicate songs of all kinds, ones I've written and, covers or whatever. So.
Okay. Now, when you, again, this is not something I had thought about asking until now, but like in the Christian genre, there seems to be like songs that tend to be like in the portfolio of songs like about God, and then more like on the worship side of songs to God. Do you find yourself leaning one way or another when you write? And maybe not even about God, like just about life.
Yeah, I really write songs. I think that the easiest ones for me to write would be songs about life that are that have faith as an element or have scripture somehow woven in. So like a little sneaky scripture. Jehovah Sneaky is what Candy would say, our friend. So those are the easiest for me to write. Those are kind of my natural bent. But I also love writing devotional songs. And then like corporate worship songs, I find really challenging to write. And so I'm in a season right now where I am challenging myself to write more of those. I find them harder to write because they have to be singable for the average non-musician. But also it's like we got to find a way to, tell the old story in a new way, and so trying not to overuse all the same phrases and things, but also make it, highly scriptural, highly biblical, completely actual worship to the Lord, focused on him. And so those are some pretty narrow parameters for a song. And so finding a new way to do that is really a big challenge. So the easy ones are this is just sort of my life experience and what's on my heart. La la la, here it is, But that's kind of low hanging fruit,
Okay. So what would you say to like a person who is where you were 20 years ago, first kind of flirting with the idea of doing music or art in some way, but having all the hesitations about it? What advice would you give to them?
I would say several things. Number one, if God's put it on your heart, don't try to squelch it. Like, just pray and ask him to show you what to do. I tried to get that songwriting thing to go away for a long time, and it wouldn't. And things started really happening when I finally said, okay, Lord, if you want me to do this, then I'm going to need some help. Show me what to do. And he sent me friends that mentored me. That and it was, and I know it was him. The other thing is,
can I camp out on that point for a minute?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I think there's such a valuable principle in what you just described, and that is the gift of humility. To be able to say, I want to do this, but I want to be teachable too. Like, I want to put myself in a position where I can hear from others. I don't want to just like isolate myself and not, say, I don't need that, just to be a place of submission, say, hey, this is a gift that I think I may have.
Exactly.
And could you teach me or show me some things? So I think, I just want to put a check mark by that exclamation point.
Oh, yeah, and absolutely. And, I think as a musician, I hear, oh, you're so talented. And I know that that's well meant, but I honestly, I might have a little bit of talent, but I don't think that's my asset as a musician. That's not my greatest asset. My greatest asset is my willingness to learn, and that I love learning. And that's really the second point that I would say, is that you need to become a student of the thing that you want to learn how to do. it's really tempting to think of the arts as just feelings based, paint what you feel, write what you feel. Well, that's the starting point, but there's a craft involved. And people who seriously do it as a profession treat it like a living, and they work at it like a living. And so learn how to do that well. But it does have to start with that humility, the willingness to learn and to be a beginner. Before you can get good at something, you got to be bad at something, right? But I think that's really where I was when this all started. And that's the advice I was receiving from my friends. Like, hey, if you want to do this, then you need to apply yourself, read some books, practice writing every day, and then the point when I finally got to go play a song for somebody who was, being kind and willing to help me, then I sat down with him and played him a song, and he's like, oh, you already know how to write songs. You've been really working at this, haven't you? And he was surprised, but then I was just so glad that I had already put all that work in before I had that opportunity,
Cool. So where can people find your stuff?
Anywhere you stream or listen to music. Then, most of the time people are using Apple Music or Spotify. And so it's really easy. It's Amy Hooper, like a hula hoop or a basketball hoop, but I don't do those things. I'm not a big video person, so I have a little bit of stuff on YouTube, but mostly it's streaming. But also, I write for other bands as well. And so, listen to your local Americana playlist and you might hear something. So...
Well, this has been so good. Thank you so much for making time to be with me today, and loved hearing this story and loved hearing how you do.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you all for joining us. It's been a great having you with us as well. And so join us again next week for another Sidewalk Conversation.